Core TV News, expanding your view.
It's a great day. Welcome to Core TV News, and you're watching Core Digest this Sunday afternoon. I say good afternoon to you, and of course, happy Sunday. Well, I'm just going to start this way. Security of any nation is directly proportional to the progress and development of that nation. That means no security, no development, little security, little development, more security, more development, much security, much development, absolute security, absolute development. My name is Tolu Ojewumi, and this afternoon we're talking about, of course, security. And what part of security? Well, let me quickly let you know that the first Nyanya bombing of April 14 left no fewer than 100 people dead and scores more injured. The second killed 30 and wounded scores of people. Well, the coordinator of the National Information Center and Director General of the National Orientation Agency, NOA, Dr. Michael Mary, made the arrest known yesterday during a media briefing on the efforts to rescue the abducted Chibok girls. We're talking about the arrest of no other person than the mastermind of the Nyanya bombings, and we're talking about Sadiq Oguche. Well, that man who was on Tuesday declared wanted by the Department of the State Services, DSS, and subsequently placed on the International Police Interpol Red Alert, has finally been arrested. Well, what are the issues surrounding this? What are the twists to it? Where and when was he arrested? And what are we battling with in Nigeria surrounding that arrest? Where are we taking it to? How did we get here in the first place? The Nigerian Constitution makes it very clear, 1999 Constitution, as amended in 2011, that the primary goal, the primary obligation, the primary responsibility of any government is the welfare and the security of the Nigerian. How far is the government carrying out this responsibility? And where are we going from here? I've got two guests on the show today, and they are people you want to listen to and watch any day, anytime. You'll never get bored watching and listening to these people. Akintoye Branko Rhodes, thanks for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
And you look very good.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Bless you, thank you.
Well, I want to call him my brother and friend, Achike Chude. Thanks for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure.
We really appreciate your coming today again. We do not take lightly your presence.
I appreciate you inviting me too.
Well, going back to the Nyanya April 14 bombing, with the security situation in Nigeria today, let me start with you, Akintoye. Where are we going?
Well, you raised a vital point when you were introducing the program. You said, how did we get here? And I think that's where we should start from. How did Nigeria get to this pitiable state? That a state that used to defend the territory of the sub-region now cannot even defend its own territory. And it's been a successive decline in this country. There's been a continuous breakdown of responsibilities and accountability by governments. And many people don't really understand why there's been a very loud outcry against corruption. Because corruption is a cancer that destroys the entire system. And what we're seeing in Nigeria is the manifestation of corruption at its full-blown stage. Which means death stage. And it is what has led to this country, as great as Nigeria has always been in Committee of Nations, in ability to secure its citizens. Because everything about the system is being compromised. And that's where you can find, when I say everything, everything, absolutely everything. The two responsibilities of government is the welfare of the people and the security of the people. Now, in those two areas, you can see that the Constitution, which are enshrined in the Constitution, you can see that the successive governments have failed. Because the welfare of people has also consistently also been in decline. So has the security of people. So I would be looking at this thing, where we are, and going forward from the corruption stage, the cancer of corruption, and then curing it and solving the larger problem and larger issues.
Okay, now, when Aminu Oguche was arrested in Sudan, the police force public relations officer, Frank Mba, on Tuesday hinted the Nigerian community that Interpol had issued a red alert for the search and arrest of the suspect who was once arrested on suspicion of terrorism,
Yes.
but released following pressures from human rights groups and the father of the suspect. Now, Achike, you would think human rights groups will want to defend the territorial integrity of the Nigerian citizens. But this looks confusing, that human rights groups, and I can understand the father of the suspect clamoring for his release when he was initially arrested. But what about the human rights groups that should stand for our territorial integrity?
Social justice.
Yeah, you know, we also cannot forget the essence of the law, the beginning of the law, what the law is destined to achieve in society, and then the end product of the law. And that is why there is this saying that has been universally accepted, that a man is presumed innocent until proven otherwise. It's
Absolutely.
a universal law.
Yeah.
Because of the possibility of abuse by government, officials or individuals, that there is a process that when a man has become a social deviant, when a man has put himself outside of the laws of society, for instance, in the case of terrorists and so on, and other crimes, that there must be a process of getting that man arrested and prosecuting that man and getting him incarcerated, either through a pronouncement that is innocent, that is guilty, and then pronouncing a sentence for the man. Now, it is not the responsibility of human rights organizations to, investigate people who have committed crimes. Theirs, and that is why they are called human rights organizations. Here, theirs is to ensure that the basic right of the individual is protected at all times. And so, in saying this also, even prisoners have rights that have to be protected.
Yeah, I understand that.
In a war situation, for instance, there are processes that must be followed. You must make sure, for instance, if you are in the theater of war, and that's what you call humanitarian law, international humanitarian law, different from human rights law, but essentially they are mixed more or less.
Correlated.
But one has to do with civilian life and civilian government, while the other one has to do with the theater of conflict or theater of war. That even in the theater of war, concerning combatants, that there are certain laws that have been covered even under the Geneva Convention, that there are certain laws that have to be followed in order not to violate even the rights of the combatants, because combatants themselves are also human beings. Yes. And no matter how vicious wars can be, but over the years, attempts have been made to mitigate some of the excesses of war, some of the inhumanity of war. You understand? And so you have instances, for instance, they tell you that there are certain weapons that must not be used in a war theater. For instance, issue of cluster bombs, are beyond or should not be used by nations. But what you have, but in most cases, those that are signatory to some of these conventions and so on are state actors in a conflict. So what it means is that when you have governments that are involved in conflict and so on, there are certain obligations that they must observe. Otherwise, at the end of the day, they can be arrested under international, law and perhaps taken to, international criminal tribunals and so on for prosecution. Look at Charles Taylor, for instance. He was the head of state of a sovereign nation. But some of the atrocities he committed, were a violation of international humanitarian law. That is why he's in The Hague. Same thing with Slobodan Milosevic and the rest. So there are standards. Now, in civil society, no matter, because the law presumes that everybody is innocent until proven guilty, the burden of proof does not lie and should not lie with civil society organizations. Because if, for instance, somebody has been arrested and the law stipulates that he must be free within 24, 48 hours, if you violate his right, do you understand? Yeah. Then they have a right to shout. Because for all you know, at the end of the day, supposing those people have not been found guilty, look at the waterboarding issue we had in the United States, when it was said that the CIA, had this pattern of knowing that there are certain things they cannot do in the United States with prisoners. They will be breaking the laws of the land. So what they did was to have agreements with other nations of Europe and so on, so that these prisoners can be taken there to be tortured in those countries, because torture is not allowed in America. You understand? So I think that the onus, lay with the government to ensure, because if you have reasons to want to keep the man you're talking about now longer than necessary, you go to court. You understand? Yeah. And then prove to the court reasons why this man constitutes a danger, the menace to the society.
Now, Achike, before you go on, and before I come back to Akintoye, I still need you to convince me. I understand perfectly the functions of human rights organizations, because at the end of the day, injustice to one is injustice to all. Yeah. So if a young man is detained unnecessarily or before being proven by law, that is injustice. I understand that. But in this particular case, going by antecedents, that there was a shocking revelation that this man we're talking about had lived a double life and was radicalized in Welsh University, Glamorgan, in the United Kingdom. And according to Independent UK, Oguche is believed to have led a double life as an inspiring businessman while preparing also to die in the name of Allah.
Good.
So he had that tendency in him all along.
Okay.
Now, despite that, we still have human rights organizations saying we want to follow the due course. Where law is broken, there's no more place for protocol. I think
the process. I think what's missing or what's failed in this system. Yeah. Let's see how terrorists are handled internationally.
Okay.
For instance, in England, they cannot hold you beyond a certain period
of time.
Yeah. But they go to court to request additional time in the case of terrorism. Yeah. So why did the government not do that? What was the rush?
Yes.
What was the rush to release him if they still had issues with him that they hadn't sorted out?
Yes.
Now, this was why I laid the foundation.
Okay.
That endemic in this system is corruption.
Absolutely.
Now, corruption distorts reality and facts, because what ought not be is done because you can bend the system. Now, it may be true that the human rights associations intervened because the state was not doing what they ought to have done. Which is to have extended the time limit through a court process. But of course, when you talk about that in this country, where is the court process? In any case, everything is undermined. That's part of the problem. Because the state has been completely compromised.
Exactly, because you see,
and destroyed by corruption.
It was a matter of life and death. And that's what it is. Terrorism, that's what it is, a matter of life and death. Any serious government will go out of its way to ensure that this man, if all it's going to take is to keep him out of the public view, until they can prove their case, government has the power. They have the power to even go to the courts and bring all the evidence, you understand, and show the courts. And so that if the courts now release him, it becomes a problem of the courts that the burden of guilt or responsibility lies with the courts. But and it's not just Oguche with Oguche. The same thing the SSS talked about with regards to Mohammed Yusuf. He had also been captured. The leader, the Boko Haram. He was also captured, interrogated some time ago by the SSS and kept in detention. But calls from high quarters in this country ensured that the man was released to go out there into the street and to cause problems. And that is what he's saying. That beyond this issue of saying human rights groups were pleading for him. What were they pleading? And there's no human rights group that will say, look, this man, we are convinced that this man is a terrorist or is a terror suspect, and say, look, but release him all the same. Exactly. Do you understand?
Yeah.
I think what they do is to try to ensure that there is no abuse. Follow the process. Get this man incarcerated. Keep him there for as long as possible while you are investigating, him. Eventually, I mean, an investigation that would ultimately lead to his incarceration, perhaps in jail and the rest. That obviously was not done. People made calls. And I think that the call is not just the call from the father. Because what they are trying to say is that the call from Human Rights Organization for his release was important. And the call from the father too was also important. So set human rights people aside. If this man, the government had information that this man had been radicalized, and they got this information from the United States and so on, and the father pleaded for him, there is nothing the state would have done even for the father. If you had a state that was committed to preserving the interest and the territorial integrity of this country, they would not have bowed to pressure. That is the essence. And that's why he keeps on saying, ultimately, there's a breakdown. Corruption, what corruption does, and I think it's part of the United States, policy on, that corruption has a way of destroying the very essence and the soul of a nation.
Of course.
Yes.
Because everything within that structure,
it's undermined.
The system, the organization, the infrastructure, everything is undermined over
decay,
a period of time.
Decay.
You understand?
Yeah.
And that is what we are seeing in this country today.
Now, Akintoye, I'm so proud of Nigeria. Nigeria is a great country. We pride ourselves. Nigeria is a giant of Africa, we say all the time. Now, why is it that when something goes wrong and we can finger someone somewhere, we do not make an arrest there? The arrest is usually done somewhere else in some other part of the world. Someone steals money in Nigeria, they're not arrested here, they're arrested there. Governor. And then we now start, what did you say?
Delta governor in UK,
well,
not in Nigeria. Nigeria was free.
Okay,
our Nigerian courts,
I'm not
he was a free man, he didn't steal anything.
I'm just talking generally.
In UK, he's in prison for 13 years.
Okay, so why is that usually the case?
You also know that the president told us last week, a few weeks ago, that America would tell us if they are stolen 20 billion.
Yeah.
That shows you what I'm saying. That the leadership of this country seem to be disconnected with their responsibility. They don't know what they are there for. How can the president address a nation and say that when they asked, they made, it's an allegation, on the minister under the president. And the issue was, did this thing happen? He said, first of all, not even saying that we would investigate. Yeah. We will take the proper steps to ensure that this thing did not happen. But he would just dismissed it and said, if it happened, America will tell us.
If it happened.
How can... Anyway.
That is absolute abdication of responsibility.
Absolute abdication of responsibility.
And it is frightening. Because what it shows is a president and a government that does not seem to understand the burden of responsibility and duty and obligation they owe to the Nigerian people. And again, also deliberately undermining the sovereignty of the nation that they say they are supposed to be guardians of. Because when you now shift the burden of responsibility to account for the resources of this country to another government, to another president, what are you telling the people of this country?
So, going forward, now this guy, the terrorist, is in Sudan, through our borders. I haven't committed an offense.
Aminu Guche.
Yeah, I haven't committed an offense. Was able to move from Abuja to Sudan. Now, it's not that criminals cannot attempt to escape. But if they were suspects, now, for instance, the Boston bombing. The young men in Boston bombing, one of them had been picked up before by the state, but somehow fell off the radar. But when something happened in Boston, they immediately began to look for that young man because they understood, they know that he has a tendency, because he had something to do with it before.
Yeah. That was an antecedent.
And that was why, when they brought all the cameras into focus, they could distill and bring out this young man. And within 3 days,
and
3 days or 4 days with the lockdown, they had results.
You see, and it's important because that goes to the heart of the question you asked when you said the man was released on the basis of the father's intervention and
pressures from
rights
here and
groups
there.
and so on. Now, Mr. Akintoye has just told you that we had a similar kind of situation. Somebody else had been picked up before for certain suspicious activities and the rest. Why did the state release him? Because the state did not have any evidence against him at that particular point in time. But what they did was to put him on
surveillance.
On surveillance. That's what they did. And so when this thing happened, it was easy, to also pick him up. And that's what you would have expected, that once certain people, are suspected of affiliation with terror groups and dangerous organizations and so on, they are permanently under watch. But you don't pick them on the basis of suspicion that this person might be a bad person. There's a law that protects his rights. Until he violates the terms of those rights, then he's picked up and locked up, maybe forever, or killed, or whatever, judicially or whatever. This, did not happen, obviously. Why? Because the security situation in this country, the security agencies themselves have been undermined as a result of successive years of abuse. You understand? And breakdown in the system. All occasioned by the fact that our political leaders now feel it is much more important to look after personal interests than the interest of the general public of the state.
Now, in this country, let's reverse. I want us to just roll back the time. We read the allegation against James Ibori.
Yeah.
James Ibori, as a young man, or as a younger man, before public office, had stolen. And the judge in Nigeria said, this is the guy that I caught and I jailed.
Yeah.
How did James Ibori, that had that criminal record, transmute into political office? So where is the database of those who carried out that investigation against him? And why didn't they turn to that database when he showed up on the radar to go and plunder public office? This is the issue.
Database. And these and other issues are what we need to look at on this show. We'll take a break now. But before we go on that break, let me quickly remind you that the program is Court Digest, and I've got two guests on the show. Akintoye Branka Rhodes, a political analyst and progressive Democrat. Also, my brother and friend, Achike Chide, is also with me on the show this Sunday afternoon. We're talking about Aminu Oguche, the mastermind of the April 14th Nyanya bombing, and of course, the man that had been arrested in Sudan, whose extradition to Nigeria is now proving difficult. Why? And how can we get out of this quagmire? These and many more are the issues we'll be looking at when we come back from our News on the Hour. But also remember, you can reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/Court TV News. On Twitter, our handle is @Court TV News NG. And you can watch what's previous and current on YouTube, youtube.com/Court TV Liverspace News. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after the News on the Hour.
Come June 21, it will be decision day for the people of Ekiti. 18 candidates are gunning for one seat.
I am the next governor of Ekiti.
But the people will have the final say.
I know that tolerance has a very big place.
Join extensive coverage of the election and get up to the many details as development unfolds.
I'm the voice of the Ekiti people.
With expert analysis from the best political team on television.
And that's honesty of island. Without
Join us all day June 21 to find out who emerges the next governor of Ekiti State.
We have agreed to move this state forward.
Keep a date with us on Court TV News. You can also watch us live on our website on www.courttvnews.com, a 24-hour news station.